In order for you to be successful in your marriage, number one, you have to know how the other person receives love. You also have to be very clear and communicate, how do you receive love?
Guys always come to me and they say, Adam, I want to have more sex with my wife. And I say, okay, well, to do that, you're probably going to have to make her like you more. And they say, well, all right, how do I do that? All right, well, we'll build emotional intimacy.
We have to learn how to specifically and strategically love that other person.
Most men are bad at this, right? We only have to get a little unbad at it. And the more that you can do this, the more oxytocin you give her, the more serotonin you give her, the more actually that your life improves. You don't have to be perfect at this. You just do it once in a while and she will love it.
What a lot of us do is we love the other person in the way we need to feel loved, right? So if you're a guy that loves physical touch and compliments, probably how you're going to love on your wife by default. Well, what if that's not how she receives love? What if she receives love by acts of service and quality time with you?
If you tell your husband, who has no idea what that means, that you want emotional connection and he's thinking about work and how financially he could take care of the family, he will throw up on you because the emotions will disgust him. Two things that fix this. Anybody at home facing that issue right now? First thing that people do when they come into me like this, I say, all right. I had a client come into me just last month. She was frustrated that her husband did not seem to want to spend much time with her. He was pursuing their financial goals. He was trying to grow. Yeah, you've met guys like this, right? He's trying to grow and take care of his family, but the wife is not as happy at home. Have you seen this couple, man?
100 times.
Yeah. And what's the biggest problem with them, do you think? Like between the wife feeling unloved and him feeling like he's got to chase his dream, what do you think is the biggest friction point?
Well, it's the disconnect that they both want the same things, but they're coming at it from two different directions.
I love it. You nailed it. They want the same things, but they have no idea. They actually think they're in competition with each other. They think one of them has to win and the other one has to lose. And it sucks. It sucks. So two things that fix this. Anybody at home facing that issue right now? Okay. Scott, take notes. This will be beautiful.
I am. I got my notepad right here.
First thing that people do when they come into me like this, I say, all right, we're going to build the 6 pillars of your marriage. 6 pillars of your marriage. It's a marriage agreement. We're going to sit down and do what you should have done while you were dating. Okay. We're going to build you the arrangement that your marriage is going to operate under for the rest of your life. So I take them aside and then I say, don't look at them. Look at me. Look at me. Speak to me. Okay. Tell me what 3 things are mandatory in your relationship for the rest of your life that would make it sustainable. Sustainable is the word that we need to continue focusing on here, because if you're living a high performance life, you must be able to sustain it. Otherwise it will fall apart under you and you will check out at age 45 or 50. You're going to die or your marriage will die, one or the other. So you must be able to sustain it. Minimum amount of energy input. What's the most sustainable thing? 3 things. Okay. And they always start off saying, well, I want him to stop. Nah. Stop is not a thing. Okay. Your husband cannot stop a thing. Your husband also can't not do a thing. Your husband can do a thing. He is doing things. You would rather he do other things. Let's replace. Okay. Let's replace. Okay. Well, what would I rather he be doing? Okay. I want more. What do they usually say? I want more emotional connection with my husband. That's amazing. And I agree with you. That is necessary. If you tell your husband, who has no idea what that means, that you want emotional connection and he's thinking about work and how financially he could take care of the family, he will throw up on you because the emotions will disgust him. So let's make that measurable. Emotional intimacy. What does that look like to you, right? Scott, what does emotional intimacy look like to you? Let me ask you that question.
Yeah. So to me, I think I'm a Gary Chapman 5 love languages guy. So I'm definitely a physical touch and words of affirmation. So I feel emotionally loved when I have intimacy in my marriage and when I have the affirmation that that I'm doing for them, especially her, is being received and appreciated. And
hold on. I want to dissect those 2 pieces. Because what you just said is perfect. You feel good when there's intimacy in your marriage and when the things you're giving to her are being appreciated. We need to make that more measurable. Because that's not understandable. You say that to a woman, she's going to say, what do you mean? You want sex and thank yous? Like, well, what do I do? Right? Okay, let's make that measurable. You said more intimacy. Yeah, I mean, yes. You said more intimacy in your relationship. What does more intimacy? Sex? Does that mean is that what you mean? Sex?
Yeah, I think that's one component. It's the most important component. So
Okay.
it's the start, because
Okay.
I believe that that actually builds a closer relationship in a lot of other ways. When we're intimate, and I kind of consider there's two things that I've broken this down, and I want you to take it your direction, but I want to just divert
Mhm.
for 1 second.
Yeah.
What I would say with intimacy is I've learned in marriage that I need one connection point every month, meaning
Mhm.
that it can't just be getting together for the purpose of getting together. It's got to be real,
Okay.
connected, present. Like,
Beautiful.
that's important to me. And I know
Okay.
that that's important to us. And I have to force that occasionally, because that's something that I value very heavily. And
I'm
so
going to
this,
use
go ahead.
I'm going to use you as our model then. So you just listed all three things you need in a relationship. Intimacy, we're going to unpack that, make that even more measurable, right? Appreciation, and one connection point per month. Let's make those measurable. Okay, let's make it so simple that a Martian from Mars, if they flew down, could read your instruction manual and be the perfect wife for you. Let's make it that simple, okay, so that everybody can understand. Sex, you talked about sex as one component. Sex, how many times a week are you looking for that would be optimal for you with a partner that you love? What are you thinking? 5 times a week, 20 times a week, 3 times a week?
Well, I whatever we have, I'm always going to ask for more. So if
Okay.
it's 3, I want 4. If it's 4, I want 5. If it's 5, I
Okay.
want 7. But I would say 3 times a week is very fair.
Cool. And that's sustainable. That's not
Yes.
too low to be non-sustainable. So at least 3 times a week. Sex at least 3 times a week. Now, are we talking quickies? Are we talking like warm, intimate moments? An hour, 5 hours, hanging from the swing? What are
That's
we
the
doing?
one connection a month. I think at the end of the day, there has to be a moment where there's a separation. My wife and I have something called ROM, weekends or weeks, that we've been doing for over a decade. And we teach people how to do these, but it's the rekindle our marriage. And at the end of the day, if you take our second born son was born, we had this major disconnection because I thought I was doing everything right by taking the older one. She wasn't getting what she needed. We decided to separate, not separate, just to get away from the kids for a weekend. We go to the Caribbean. We're on a boat, on a ferry, and she hugs me and she goes, "This is our ROM weekend." And I said, "I don't know what that means, but it sounds great to me." And I said, "What does that mean?" She goes, "To rekindle our marriage weekend." And I'm a visionary, man. I took that to like 8 levels. So at the end of the day, I'm going to wine and dine her. I'm going to treat her like a queen. I'm going to do everything I can. And it was reciprocated. Everything I needed, everything we needed together, we gave each other. One-on-one conversation, my direct eye contact, the phone down, all the things we were learning about each other. And what I learned is our marriage really needed a couple of those a year. At the minimum, 6 months was the greatest. The norm was a quarterly separation. And so going back to answer your question, in doing those ROMs, I learned that there is a deeper connection that we have when we separate. So I have to have a separation once a month where there is nobody else there and it's just us and there's no distractions and that connection is good. The rest of it can be whatever. I mean, the rest of it is serviceable.
Okay, so your 3 pillars so far. Sex, about 3 times a week minimum. You need at least one major reconnection point throughout the rest of the month, right? At least once a month and then 3 times a week. So there's 2 pillars for your marriage right there. Very measurable, very clear, and we've defined them, okay? A woman could walk in and understand exactly what you're saying now, okay? And number 3 was appreciation for things that you do for her. What does appreciation look like to you? How would you know that a woman was appreciating the things you had done for her? How would you know by looking at her or hearing her?
Well, again, I think it's interesting. We have to know ourselves and know how we feel loved. So, one of the things that I notice of a lot of friends and a lot of us in our lives, when we walk in the door after work, and we both work. So this is challenging. My wife's a school teacher, so she's been home for 2 to 3 hours by the time I walk in the door, sometimes longer. And life just keeps moving on so often. And so one of the things that we've talked about in our lives that we appreciate is that I kind of like it to stop for a second, for an acknowledgement, like it's respect, it's a hello, it's a kiss, it's something that just says, "Hey, I kind of missed you, even if I didn't, and it's good to see you." And that is a really simple thing. One thing I've never struggled with. So a lot of men that you're going to work with are going to struggle with actually knowing what they want, what they need, and actually showing it. I have not had that problem. I'm probably the opposite, but I'm not saying I'm the opposite where I need a lot of extra attention, but I do need a lot of extra attention.
I hear you.
But yeah, that's the point is that would be how I would define that.
That's wonderful. So you need to be greeted with joy
like it.
when you enter. That's good. That's a good thing. You want to be greeted with joy, especially when you come home from work. That's fantastic. You need sex about 3 times a week, and you need a deep reconnection point with your partner about once a month. Those are your 3 pillars for a marriage. Those are that makes it sustainable. Okay. So I would sit a couple down and I would do exactly that process I just did. And then the other partner looks at them and says, that's all you want? That's measurable. That's easy. I can do that. Right. And you've been fighting for 15 years trying to figure out what the heck they want from you. And they just did that right there. So then the other one, I go through with the process with the other one. They give their 3. It's funny how often they overlap. We usually only get like 3 or 4 pillars usually instead of 6, but up to 6 pillars where they all, then we mesh them together. And I say, that's not your 3 and your 3. That is your 6 as a couple. Now we are going to agree. Can we as a couple agree that we both desire sex 3 times a week, and the conditions under which she would follow suit and say, yes, I can do that if this, right? Emotional intimacy, bases like that. Sex 1 to 3 times a week, 1 big reconnection per week. What wife is going to be like, nah, I don't really think I want to reconnect with you once a month on a couple's like date night, right? No, they're going to love that, right? And then being greeted at the door. She'll probably say, you know what? That's a fantastic idea. If I'm the one who comes home, could you greet me at the door as well? Could we both just be happy to see each other? And when we pass in the hallway, could we be happy to see each other there too? Right? That appreciation, that desire, that love, that warmth. That's what you're talking about. So we put those together and that becomes the operating agreement for the marriage. So then if you have disagreements, you move forward from there. That unifies you instantly onto this is the marriage we're trying to build. Now it's simply a very practical process of removing any and all obstacles, whether that's behaviors or environmental challenges or any other issues that are popping up. Let's remove or reduce the friction from any complicating variables that are deviating from this core marriage.
Everyone knows that in the United States, the divorce rate is 50 to 51%, give or take right now. What a lot of people don't know are the statistics of the marriages that stay together. This is scary. So the 50% that stay together are actually divided up into 3 camps pretty darn equally. I don't know like how equally, but pretty darn close. So 33%, just take it for 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 of couples that stay married and stay together can actually identify their relationship is working. Like, hey, this is great. I love it. My wife and I are in that camp. I love it. You know, I wouldn't really change much. We're communicating. Our intimacy is on point. Our sex life is on point. Our parenting is on point. Everything is feeling pretty darn good, right? And I'm not going anywhere. Love this woman. Love this man, period. The second camp, the next 1/3 is like, it's okay. You know, it's like, it's not everything I thought it would be. I don't really want to go anywhere. I love her. She loves me. I think, you know, we talk more high level managerial things. Maybe our physical relationship isn't the best, but it's okay. Like we're kind of buddies, right? And we hang out. Then the last camp is complete and total disconnect. They are living totally different lives, individual lives. Usually there's quote unquote extracurricular activities happening. And they're just waiting for the kids to move out before they get divorced. And the top 2 reasons that couple doesn't get divorced is either financially it'd be too devastating, or the one that I kind of laugh at now is we got to stay together for the kids. That's great. Give your kids a front row seat to a dysfunctional relationship. That's exactly what every kid needs, right? So the first camp, there's common denominators in that first camp. The common denominators are this, and this is what they've studied. John Gottman has even studied this. Is that couples that are successful understand that there's more to it than love. That's a foundational element, but they also know, like, in order for me to operate well within this marriage, I need to constantly be growing. I need to constantly learning. I need to constantly be refining my skills. You know, you've got to be a fantastic communicator. And in order to be a fantastic communicator, you got to learn how to be a better communicator. You have to learn how to pull your weight, as a husband. She has to learn how to pull her weight as a wife, right? We have to learn how to specifically and strategically love that other person. What a lot of us do is we love the other person in the way we need to feel loved, right? So if you're a guy that loves physical touch and compliments, it's probably how you're going to love on your wife by default. Well, what if that's not how she receives love? What if she receives love by acts of service and quality time with you, undistracted quality time? But you don't know that. And it usually shows up in like, she just doesn't understand me. He just doesn't get me, right? We just don't feel connected. So people that stay in love, people that are connected are growing together, learning new skills together, and they're constantly sharpening, and they know it's going to be work, but they're overall they're fulfilled. So as it relates to Jessica and I, right? I know very specifically how to love Jessica, and it's not how I receive love. We actually are just fresh off of the she and I took the love language test, retook it just 2 nights ago. And so
A retake. How many years has it been?
Gosh, man, probably 7
Okay.
at the
Just
least.
curious.
Yeah. And mine have kind of tweaked a little bit, and so have hers. But I will tell you, physical touch is 40% of how I receive love. For Jessica, it's 7. 7, right? So like all this touchy-feely stuff that I like, hug me, kiss me, like let's have sex, right? That's 7%. Now I will tell you, like our sex life is extremely healthy. Like we have sex a lot. However, it's because I know how to love that woman in her love languages, which is acts of service, quality time, right? And very specific ones. So I'll tell you that in order for you to be successful in your marriage, number one, you have to know how the other person receives love. You also have to be very clear and communicate, how do you receive love, right? So Jessica knows how to turn my dials, and I know how to turn hers, which is great. The other thing too is I think it's really important to have a shared vision that's based around your core values as a married couple. What is the vision of your marriage? Not what happens while we're married, because a lot of people are, management by crisis, and we manage things as they come in. But what is the vision that you're chasing as a married couple that is intertwined into your core values? So that's another one. I'll share a couple things with you that I think are most meaningful to Jessica and I. Jessica and I went through an exercise that we take all of our mastermind guys through, and that's called defining your core values. And a lot of people are like, well, what's core values? It's actually 150 different core values. And every human being on the planet operates within 5 to 7 core values. Now, a couple different core values are like community, service, environment, connection. These types of things are core values, right? Vitality is one as well. So this is how core values usually show up for people, though. Core values are under the surface. It's more intuitional intelligence. It more shows up as, I don't know what it is about this, but it doesn't feel right. Or I don't know what it is about this, but it feels really good to me. That's how core values really emerge, unless you go through an exercise like what we do in the Dad Edge, which is defining your core values, which you actually go through an exercise and you learn them. So what Jessica and I do, and we encourage our guys to do this as well, is go through that process individually, identify your 5 to 7 core values as an individual, and then come together as a married couple and compare your 5 to 7 core values as an individual and be like, hey, how do we merge these together, and what are most meaningful? Jessica and I have gone through this. So the interesting thing about our relationship and our individual core values is 4 out of 7 of them were pretty much aligned. So we're like, wow, well, gosh, no wonder we kind of work pretty well together from just an underlying operational standpoint. But, like one of the shared values in our relationship is experiences over stuff. So we don't accumulate nice cars. We don't accumulate designer clothes. We spend our time, our resources, our energy on experiences and adventure as a family, right? And that's a shared vision for our relationship. A lot of couples they don't even know that might be something that they do. That's just one element of several. I won't get into really much more, but when it comes to that, but if once you have a shared vision for your marriage and a way you operate, does that raise intimacy? Oh my gosh, does it ever, right? Because you feel insanely aligned. One other aspect is your shared vision for parenting. one of the top 5 fights that married couples have is parenting. And I think a lot of it could be avoided if you simply sit down and really understand, what is the vision for us as parents? What are we trying to accomplish and achieve here? Versus, we're 2 different people operating off 2 different past experiences of how we were raised. And a lot of times what people do is they make 2 different choices when they're a parent. I'm either going to repeat the things that were done to me when I was being raised, or I'm not going to do them. Right. And that's kind of the filter we run parenting through. It's really, really important, though, really important for you to sit down with your wife and to say, what are the things we want to do? What are most meaningful, and what are the bear traps that we don't want to repeat? And to make sure that you're operating within that alignment. I'll give you one quick example and then we can move on. One of the things that Jessica and I have always agreed on, and this is something that I think a lot of marriages fall in a pitfall of, is we will never disagree with the other person as it relates to a parenting decision in front of the kids. So if Jessica lays down, a disciplinary action, puts a kid in timeout because they did X, Y, and Z, and if I don't agree with it, our agreement is I don't call her out on that, and she doesn't call it out on me. I can't even tell you how many times I made a parenting decision and I looked over at her and I could tell she was like, not so sure I'm on board with that one. But our agreement is I got your back no matter what. And if I disagree with you, I'm going to tell you in private, away from the kids, because the kids will sense that divide and they will use that, right? Not intentionally or maliciously. They're just kids, but that's how they will use it. So, if I lay down a disciplinary action, she doesn't agree, she'll back me and be like, that's what dad said, and I'm on board. So go do that or not do that or whatever. And then in private, she'll be like, hey, you laid down that thing, you made that decision. I really wasn't on board with that. And here's why, and I want to talk about that. So like, just in the future, if this comes up again, maybe we should think differently about it, and vice versa. So that's just one of several, but you got to be on board with that one too.
Yeah, there's so many good nuggets in there. We covered a multitude of things. Number 1, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, which is
Yep.
an absolute classic. And what's funny is, before we went on that first ROM weekend or week to the Caribbean that we went on, we played that on the way on CD. This is how long ago it was. I bought it on CD because when we bought our first house, the couple we bought it from, they were remarried. And they handed us the book and they said, we want to give you this book. It's literally made our lives so much better. It changed our marriage. And we wish we would have had it for our first marriage, because we probably wouldn't have been divorced. But today it's helped us. And we put that in the drawer next to the bed. We never opened it up. And then, a couple months in with the less easy baby, the second one, and the challenge, I pulled the book out. I started reading the book, and then I knew that I needed to play it on CD, and we drove to a wedding. The baby cried the entire time in the back. It was up about 3 or 4 hour drive, and we listened to that book, and it was helping to establish, that, yeah, shocking physical touch is really important to most men, but especially some men. I still to this day, like, put my arm around my sister and like grab her, squeeze her neck and like do things. And she's like, I hate that, Scott. Why do you do this to me every time? And I'm just doing it because it's how I show love. It's how my dad often showed me love. And so my oldest son, by the way, is absolutely the same way. Like, anytime he needs to feel loved, we just have to wrestle. I got to go up. I got to mess with him a little bit. We got to, get on the ground and go at it. And he feels full. My youngest son, man, I touch him and he's like, all right, Dad, I'm good, man. I'm good. But he loves that quality time, and he actually loves gifts, which is like one of the biggest challenges when you in any type of relationship. But the point I was going to get at is I love the point of just getting on the same page, and I love that that's a crucial point. I also love identifying the values. See, when you're getting your core values aligned, that's so important. I always felt blessed and lucky that my wife and I kind of grew up in similar backgrounds. Both of us had parents that are still together, and they bicker and they do what everybody does as they age. And nobody's perfect, But what a great example in a life that we had where we both had our parents that still love each other to this day, that are both alive, and that example has helped us have a core family. And we kind of grew up, and as we grew together, and that's something that's been very valuable. And it's the core values that I think are very similar.
What you just said in there, we're fighting for each other. That's the couple who thinks I want this marriage, but you want a bad marriage, right? And that what that does is you start trying to solve problems against each other in spite of each other. You start trying to build a good marriage in spite of your partner, and that creates a cortisol association in your brain with the brain. It says this person is too stressful. I cannot solve problems with them. Get them away from me. And even if you love them, your brain doesn't like them. That cortisol floods whenever you try to solve a problem with them. When you do this, when you unify those 6 pillars or whatever tactic you're going to use, when you do that, you start solving problems. Then you start saying, okay, what's the obstacle here? We both want this marriage, this together. We're a team now. We both want the same thing, like you said, right? How do we get there? And as you unlock pieces and start building that marriage, your brain actually starts releasing vasopressin. Vasopressin is the bonding hormone that releases when you solve problems together. High performers are huge on vasopressin, right? This is why we usually bond with anybody in our life, is because we have achieved a goal with them. And the brain says, they helped me build this. I'm going to stay around them for the rest of my life. And it initiates oxytocin bonding, which then drives that emotional intimacy. It makes you want to go greet your partner at the door. It makes you want to squeeze their butt as they walk by in the hallway, right? It's because you've achieved goals together. You eliminate the cortisol association, you boost the vasopressin association. Now emotional intimacy is very easy. Now it's easy for you to like each other. That's where we step into phase 2 with couples. When they say, all right, how do we build a better marriage? Well, number 1, you unify around it. You start solving the problems, vasopressin bonding. Number 2, you institute oxytocin bonding. Now, it's maybe 30 minutes a night. Once you get in that right groove with each other, my wife and I, for example, end of the night, right? I work a number of hours taking care of my business and building that out. And I get to take lunches with my kids. It's fantastic, right? It's wonderful. She's an incredible stay-at-home mom. She's also homeschooling them. So end of the night, 9:30, we sit down and we're like, ugh. And we know, okay, we got about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes until the sleepies take us over. And we got to get up early at 5:30 to get the breakfast and stuff going again. So what do? Well, we sit down, we got a comfortable couch. We sit down on the couch and we turn on an old movie that we are not going to watch. We turn on lately. It's been like 1990s, 1980s Batman movies,
Okay.
with
Michael Keaton.
Yeah, fantastic. You just put them on. They're campy. You laugh. Sometimes it's Die Hard. Great movie for this kind of stuff. I'm going to sell 1 million Die Hard DVDs for marriage couples now. But it's you put on a movie you're not going to watch. And what it does is it gives you something to aim towards, so you're not just staring at each other awkwardly like this, trying to have a conversation. Any good therapist will tell you, especially if you're working with kids, you have to have an activity that you're doing so that you can disengage that part of the brain, but then start speaking. And then we hold hands. Make sure prioritize physical contact. If your cortisol is low, physical contact initiates that oxytocin bonding, which initiates GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid in the brain, which encourages melatonin. So you'll sleep better at night. It's also making you stronger against cortisol intrusions in the future. So GABA is an incredible thing that you mostly get through that cortisol, through the oxytocin release in your marriage. So holding hands, physical contact. My wife will lean against me and kind of snuggle. She's got a baby because we just had a baby 7 weeks ago. So she's got a baby on her, and then she's on me, and I'm like, all right, crushed against the side of the couch. But we're happy because you're in that happy sleep, the snuggle pile, right? And your body starts releasing oxytocin. Then we start talking about our day, and I say, babe, what we do wins and challenges. What was your win today, and what was a challenge that you faced? And she'll tell me, oh, the win was this and this. The kids did great. They're ahead in studies. They're like 2 years ahead in their math. They're brilliant kids. She's like, they did this. It was phenomenal. Challenge was, this child didn't sleep very good last night, so their behavior was off today. We were kind of going back and forth. Took a long time to get them back on track. I don't even know if I did by the end of the day. I feel like I flubbed something there. I don't know what I was doing, but I'll get back on track tomorrow. And I say, okay. I don't even solve her problem. I just say, okay, sounds like you got it. If you need any help, let me know. Sometimes she'll ask for advice, sometimes she won't, but just being heard and being connected, she loves that. She says, what was your win? What was your challenge? Oh, I was on this great podcast with Scott. We got to just talk and have a fantastic conversation. It was so cool. Challenge today, whatever the challenge will be today. I'm sure something will happen. It always does. And then we talk about it and we just feel seen and heard. We relax and unwind. There's structured ways for doing this, you guys, especially men who don't know how to share and bond, right? Even wait a minute now, Scott. Would you like me to share my 4-point interaction for men who want to build emotional intimacy with their wife in 4 points?
Let's do it. 4
That
points.
just occurred to me, but that's something we could teach right now.
Let's do it.
Ooh, you're gonna like this one, Scott. Okay. So guys always come to me and they say, Adam, I want to have more sex with my wife. And I say, okay, well, to do that, you're probably gonna have to make her like you more. Then they say, well, all right, how do I do that? All right, well, we'll build emotional intimacy. What the heck does that mean? Okay, emotional intimacy is when you open up to her and you reveal yourself a bit to her emotionally. Well, that's going to be gross and that's going to be weird and I don't want to cry. Well, you don't have to cry. Here's what you're going to do. Solution focused sharing, okay? The male brain, it observes problems and then acts upon them, back to front, back to front. The female brain observes a problem and then goes back and forth across the hemispheres and then spits out a solution. So it takes a little bit longer, but it analyzes your solutions is what it is. So you're going to go to your wife, you're going to click in with her like this. Your brains are going to click and you're going to say, hey, babe, can I get 10 minutes of your time to run something by you? She's going to say, yes, you've never done this before. Yeah, okay. And you'll say, okay, here's a problem I'm having, right? So you share, number one, you share a problem you are facing. This is not complaining. You're going to say, I'm running something by you to get feedback. There's this guy at work. He's a jerk. He won't stop talking to me. He's always kind of problems. He's always kind of rude. I don't know, and he's just there. Okay, share the problem. A relational problem, they love it. So even better. Relational problem. Then you share how the problem is making you feel so that you're a relatable human being and she can see what your feelings are like and how you respond to things. This guy is annoying the heck out of me. I can't stand it. It's making it hard to work. I'm very frustrated. Okay. Step number 3. You share the solution that you as a man probably have already thought of, or that you've got a solution from another guy. I think I'm just going to hit him with a brick. That will solve this problem. He will stop talking and he will no longer be a jerk because he will be unconscious. It will be perfect. I have the perfect brick out front in the yard. I'm going to take it to work tomorrow with me. Isn't this a great idea? Okay. Most guys at this point will stop and say, well, if I already have a solution, why am I telling my wife? This is just complaining. That's an extra step. I will just go do the thing that I'm going to do. Right? Pause. The reason that you're connecting with her is actually to analyze that solution to see if there's other effects that you're not thinking about, or see if there's a better way to do what you're about to do, right? Other men can't usually do that. They'll tell you if the solution will work, but women will tell you what the effects of that solution will be. That's how their brains are designed to work. So you say these magic words. Before I do that, do you have any insight to share with me? Can you see anything that I've missed? And she'll say, well, a brick would be very effective, but have you considered blah, 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 blah. If you do that, this will happen. Their brain will say, if this happens, this relationship will be interrupted. This will happen. This will happen. These are how all the interrupted relationships will all hit each other across the ecosystem. So instead of that, here's an alternate. What do you think of this? Women will usually ask you a question. What do you think of this? And they'll propose a different solution. You'll go, how did you think of all those things? Okay. Yeah, actually, that makes sense. I appreciate that feedback. I'll give that some thought and I'll think about doing that tomorrow instead. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then end of the conversation. It's that easy, right? You run the solution by her and it's going to be whatever it's going to be. And she'll share something. You thank her for it. Here's why this works. Number one, you are opening up emotionally to her. Women are designed to love this biochemically and socially. Their brains are designed to say, he's confiding in me. He's sharing with me. I now understand how his brain works. And so I feel more secure and safe. But this makes me valuable in his life. In fact, if a blonde-haired bikini bimbo walks by who's 19 years old, he won't leave me for her because over the years, as he opens up to me and I learn to give him better and better advice, nobody can ever replace me, and he's investing in me. I am safe and secure, and this is why their emotional intimacy goes up. Then they like you, then they trust you, then their sex drive goes through the roof. Then you can't get a night off because they're chasing you down the hallway. So if you want that effect, those are the 4 points. Scott, what do you think of those? I bet you already do that with your wife, don't you?
I think sometimes. I think I still I'm still an entrepreneur and a hard worker and somebody that puts his head down and just likes to finish the job. And then when I'm asked about what it was like or what I did or what I went through, I don't like to relive it. So it's challenging for me to do that. And so to bring in, and I'm also a solutions person. I handle a lot of things. So we recently had a great I think our kids are teenagers and we have one getting ready to go to college. We have one living away playing soccer in an academy. And so we're at this almost like empty nest mode in our lives. And there's a reliance upon each other that changes. And so I'm noticing that I'm more willing and I'm trying harder to open up about the process versus just the solution and the ending. So, if she talks about retirement from teaching in the future, right, and when she's going to do that, right, the old me would say, "Give me the number. I'll call the person that handles it. Let me." Now, she gathers the information. We talk about it. Like I have to make sure that together we're a part of it, even if it's what I've done my whole life in my career. It's important that we're learning and growing in this together. And so I'm humbly admitting I've been bad at it for many, many years. I'm also admitting that I'm trying to be better. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Most men are bad at this, right? We only have to get a little unbad at it. And the more that you can do this, the more oxytocin you give her, the more serotonin you give her, the more actually that your life improves. You don't have to be perfect at this. You just do it once in a while and she will love it. And then you will love it too. And then it becomes second nature because what you love becomes what you do. That's the pattern. You get rewarded for the things that you like.
It kind of goes like this. We had our first son and everything was fairly easy. He was a pretty easy baby. He listened quite well. He slept really good. You know, the trap that you have to have that second child, which I'm extremely grateful for, but we did. And we had that second child. And I felt like, hey, I've done this before. I know what to do. I'm going to take the oldest and I'm going to go out and we're going to go run errands and I'm going to come home from work and we're going to do fun things. And, all of a sudden I'm trying to relieve Adrian of time. So with my oldest so that we can actually have her and the youngest have time to bond and do the things that they want to do. And I thought I was helping. I wasn't helping. I was hurting. And one day she's like, "You get to do all the fun stuff. How come you're doing all the fun stuff and I'm doing all the hard stuff?" And we had this like really good conversation that was kind of an argument and a disagreement. And so it was kind of building. I remember listening to the Five Love Languages with Gary Chapman as we drove to a wedding and our youngest cried all the way up and all the way back. And the stress of having two children was very challenging. It also happened to be that I was in the world of finance and it was 2009 that this happened. And 2008 and 2009 were two very challenging years in the financial world. And so I was making less money for the first time in my career after having record years every year. And then all of a sudden I'm making less money and I don't feel connected the way that we were. I thought I had fatherhood figured out. 3 years in, I was ready. I was good. I didn't have anything figured out. We didn't have anything figured out. We were just doing our best. But these snags that we hit, we had to find a solution. And so after all these things, we were still investing, we were learning, we were trying, but we decided to go on a trip. And early on in our marriage, I set the precedent that I didn't travel a lot growing up. So we were going to take trips every time we had a chance. And luckily, the company that I worked for, we earned 2 great trips a year. They were elaborate and 5-star hotels. They were beautiful things that we normally couldn't even afford at the time. And I'm forever grateful for those experiences. I'm even more grateful for this because in this story, we end up heading out to the Caribbean. We're in the British Virgin Islands. We're on a ferry heading to Tortola or somewhere like that, St. John's. I don't remember exactly where we are. I can almost see what we're wearing. That's how impactful this moment was to me. And Adrian kind of gives me a hug. She comes in and she kind of leans into me and looks up at me. And I still remember it. And she goes, "Hey, this is our ROM week." And I said, "ROM? I like the way that sounds, but I don't know what ROM means." And if you listen to me and you've listened to my videos before, you know what ROM means, but I'm going to explain it to anyone that's never listened before. And so ROM, she goes, means rekindle our marriage. And I said, well, we need that. And I know exactly what we need to do. And she goes, all right, listen, we're gonna work on it together. And we started a week of just reconnection. Rom and rekindling our marriage was about having moments where we forgot that we were parents, that we forgot that we were busy with work, or we were challenged in an environment that wasn't perfect, and that we were maybe making a little less money than the year before, or whatever it was. It was about each other. It was about reconnection, about reestablishing the right kinds of boundaries, reinvesting in each other. It was about actually learning what we needed to learn about growing up together, because we were kids. We got married in our early 20s. We were kids, and we had to learn what each other needed. And so a ROM week, or even a ROM weekend, really is a trip to remove yourself from everything you normally do. So it cannot be the norm. You cannot do this in your house. It's very difficult. You can have a great moment in your house, but you cannot do this in your house. It requires you to separate from the everyday, to separate from the children. And by the way, after the kids are gone, I'm just now kind of feeling what that might feel like. I still believe that this is necessary. You still have to separate from the everyday, because you get into these habits that don't always include each other. And the farther along you go in these habits, the further away you can go from each other. So during a ROM week, obviously intimacy is mandatory. It's mandatory if your love language is physical touch, 100%, but it's also mandatory if you're a man, because every man's love language is physical touch and then something else. So for me, it's words of affirmation. Just knowing that there's good things we're doing together, knowing that she feels that I'm doing the right things for her, that I feel appreciated. These are important. For my wife, it was about being quality time, having time together. I think there's some acts of service in there as I've gotten older, but I'm still trying to figure that one out. The reality was, we also had some adventures. We did some things that were uncomfortable. We did some things together that we didn't normally do. So growing up, I could tell you, when we were dating, if we were both on the beach, I would often go and play soccer or play volleyball or do whatever. And then she would lay out and talk to the girls. And I really tried to be more centered in and around her. And that was me stepping out of my comfort zone. And I know it sounds like it's a no brainer. And I'm sorry if you're listening to this and you had this figured out so early, but we were two young kids who had just had kids, and we were figuring out 5, 6 years into our relationship how to make this an epic, long love story, not something that was just going to be a great relationship, had a couple kids, and gave up. And if we were going to do that, it was going to be really easy to do that. But it was going to be very difficult to keep investing in each other, to listen to each other, to talk about things. I like to go deep. I like to talk about deep topics. And she gave me that time. We had conversations about where we would send the kids to school and what we'd be doing. And I'm looking into the future and the vision. We also had some conversations about what she needed on a day-to-day basis, what she needed help with, things I might not be thinking about that were really important to her and the kids. We focused on reconnection, and we did things throughout, like dinners alone and dinners with couples. I love going out. When we do ROM weeks or weekends, we always seem to meet couples, and they become like immediate friends. You meet in an elevator, or you're at the pool and you start talking, and before you know it, you're having this great relationship with these people that you may never see again. But for that week or that weekend, they're your best friends. And so by having a dinner alone and focus just on each other, but also having time with other people, when you're with other people, it gives you a chance to see why you love the other person. I always get to see the things I love about my wife when we're around other people. I love her confidence. I love her discipline. I love the ability that she has to make the room feel better, or to laugh at herself, or to say anything and not worry about what anyone else is thinking. I don't always see that when it's just the two of us. But when I'm with her alone, or when I'm with her with someone else, I really notice it because it makes me laugh. It makes me feel good. It takes pressure off of me in the conversation because I know she's going to say something funny or something interesting. And I'm using this example because I think so often we think it can only be the two of us, but it really can't. The recipe includes experiencing life with other people. The adventure part, I think, is really good because you have to kind of know what the person needs. And I need adventure. And most of the time, she wants consistency. And it's fine. If we could go to the pool or go to the beach and we could listen to the waves and she could read a great book, she's fine. I cannot sit that long. I've got to do something else. So we have to give and take. But the reality is, a ROM week or a ROM weekend is more about giving than it is about taking. It's more about you giving of yourself to somebody else that you love, that you chose, that you picked, and you're recentering around the things that matter to them. And if you're both doing that, you're both extremely reconnected. So we would come back from this, and we were on the plane ride back, and I can remember like it was yesterday, her going, I needed that. We needed that. And what's interesting is I took note, and we started doing that twice a year minimum. I found that in our marriage, if we didn't do that every 6 months at a minimum, we really, really struggled a bit. And when I say struggle, I love our marriage. I love our family. I love everything we have. But it just means that we weren't on the same page all the time. And it can show up in little short-term frustrations or things that you don't need. And this made it better. So I started to really focus on at least having one trip that we got away from, and then a weekend or two throughout the year where we separated for just the two of us. We have some friends we go to Virginia winery together with every holiday season, and it was always a fun thing. We have some other friends that we travel with and we went skiing with. I'm not a big skier. I don't love it, but I do like it enough that I've gone a couple times, and my wife loves it. So again, it's something that we do. And then we have some times where we just go away together. Sometimes if you really need it, that's where the date night comes in. If you just have to have something in a short term, quick fix, separate, drop everything, take a staycation for one night. For us in Virginia Beach, we have a great beach. We can go down to the Cavalier. We can rent a room. We can have a great dinner, walk on the beach, and just remember again that we're two separate people that have come together to create something great. The greatest thing we've ever done is create our family. And the smartest thing we ever did, at least I believe, is marry each other. And that starts all the other great things that happened. It started the great story. What do you need to do when you hit these rough patches? What are the things you want to pay attention to? Well, ROM is the solution, but here's a couple takeaways. Takeaway number one is give more. What does your partner need? What makes them happy? If you find yourself just thinking about what makes you happy, your relationship is never going to work. Or you're always going to be unhappy because all you're focused on is you. I. And this is hard. This is hard for everybody, especially if you feel like you need more. But the reality is, if you need more, you have to give more. Giving more in a ROM is one of the most important things you can do. Separate and provide that human what they need the most of. Number two is stepping out of your comfort zone. Stepping out of your comfort zone can go a couple of different ways. Number one, it means change location and know your partner's location preferences. I know that if I take my wife to the beach, we are both going to be happier. If it's the Caribbean, or if it's a beautiful Florida Gulf beach, if there's pretty water and we can get up with the sun, we can go to bed early because that's really important to her. Not always important to me, but super important to her. And we can actually have great weather, beach days, get a good tan, have a couple of drinks. She's really happy. And I'm really happy as well. Now, I also love going to Europe, and that's an adventure that I love. So if we went to Europe, that would be more focused on me and less on her. If we went to the Caribbean, that would be me focusing more on what she loves. Give and take, but give more. So for me, if I only in the beginning years, I only went to the Caribbean because she loved it, and that's what mattered to me. If I knew she had a great time, then we had a great time. Stepping out of my comfort zone, removing location was very important. The other stepping out of the comfort zone is things like parasailing. I've never wanted to parasail. I don't like it. I think it's ridiculously dangerous. It's always like two random guys that bought a boat that looks like it's falling apart. I don't know how they got a license to do this, and she likes to do it. So I've done it once with her, and I did it because it was out of my comfort zone, not something I like to do. I really didn't enjoy it at all. The only thing I liked about it was when we were coming down. But the truth was she loved it, and she knows that I stepped out of my comfort zone for her. These are all things that matter. So often we show love in the way that we need to feel loved. And that's not really what we should be doing. We should be focusing on how the partner needs to feel loved. And they should be focusing on how we need to feel loved. And if that's the case, then we can certainly do better. Another key takeaway is no kids, and preferably no family. So, you really have to separate from who you are. And what I mean by that is this is not who you are really. This is who you were before you had kids. This is not your role in your family. So, if you're the one that cooks everybody dinners all the time and you're the mom that's the superhero and does all the work like my wife, like my mom, well, that's not the version of you that we want. And the same for me. Like if you're running a business and you're super involved, I used to leave my cell phone in the locked box in the room. And I would go out to the beach all day, separate completely all day, because if I'm constantly checking in with everybody, I've got to separate from the role that I'm in, as do they. So we have to create that gap so we can become who we really are. It's funny, I had this conversation with some friends about the vacation thing I was talking about, where you meet this couple and you have the greatest time, and you don't see those people again, but you're a version of yourself that you don't actually get to see very often. Why? Why is that version hidden in us? Why is it that we have to separate to go on vacation to be as fun-loving as we know we are, to be as open-minded and interested in other people as we know we are? It's just something about separating from the stress of life that gives us that freedom to be who we are. And you've got to do that when you separate on these weekends. You really have to step into who you are. As long as you continue to make it about the other person, both of those things can work together. So no kids, no family, and nothing that brings you back into a role that doesn't allow you to be who you are meant to be. And the last thing is you have to normalize these. They have to be normalized. You have to make them so that when you're doing them, you know that it's not the last time you're going to do it. Now, there is some fun in thinking that it could be the last time, but it doesn't work. The most important thing is to know that there's another time, that there's going to be another time where I invest in you, where you invest in me, where we put each other's needs, goals, love, marriage, partnership, relationship, whatever it is, right in front of each other for everyone else to see.
Let me give you an example of me and my wife, because we are actually completely different. I grew up kind of like you, Scott. Like you mentioned, I grew up in a household of 22 people in India, in a small town called Jaipur. I'm not highly educated. I built my life from ground up by traveling the world and learning from as many mentors and coaches as I possibly can. That's kind of how I have built my life today. And so my default is security. Money's job is to make me feel safe every single day. That's the place I operate from. That's the questions I ask. That's the kind of investments I make. Even my investment philosophy is based on that. My wife, on the other hand, had a really traumatic childhood in a way. She grew up in Chicago, but she lost her parents when she was 19, and her brother. So very early on in life, she said, life's to capture, life's to like hold on to and celebrate every single day, because you don't know what happens tomorrow, right? So of course she operates from a place of how can we make greatest experience of today? Like she's not thinking 3 years. I mean, she does. She's a great thinker, but like her primary objective is today is a great day. Let's live it to the fullest, right? Now we are two opposite ends of the spectrum if you think about it, right? Because I'm thinking security at all times and she's thinking life's too short, right? And it's fair for both of us to believe that. But because we have these conversations and we're very open about it, what we get to do is we get to ask a common question to each other. And the question is, what will an amazing life look like to you on a daily basis, right? And that would be the fourth question I want to offer today on the call is what would an amazing life look like to you, right? What is it? What does it include? Let's write down everything that we can imagine, right? What is it? It means, oh, we travel 3 times a year. Great. What kind of places are we going to go? Oh, we're going to go here, here, and here. I want to be able to, eat out once a week because anyways, we don't like really eating out because of the seed oils that are there in every kind of cuisine, every kind of food that is out there. But sure, we still want to, whenever we go out, we're going to eat really nice food like Michelin stars and onwards. And like once a week at best, or maybe twice a week. All right, great, awesome. We love date nights, which we want to do exciting experiences, and we would do them every week. It requires us to always book a hotel room and so forth. So we write these experiences down, and people go, wow. And we write down, and we go, okay, what is the cost of this life? What's the cost of this life? And what you would find is once you identify the cost of life, it is much more attainable than what you would think. Because we think, oh, it's impossible, dude. Because people write things that are just insane. That are so far out of reality that you don't even want it. You're just chasing it because somebody else said so. So for example, people would say, I would like to drive a Lamborghini. Really? Would you like to? Have you ever sat in one? It's the most uncomfortable bullshit car. Like if you want to drive a Lamborghini, you're 22 probably because you've never seen anything like that in life. But the more mature you get, you're like, no, I don't want a Lamborghini. It's uncomfortable. It's just for show. You can't really hit the speed ever. So what's the point of having a car like that? It's a stupid car to have. But you don't ask those questions. And because you don't ask those questions, you write these random things on the item of dream life instead of saying, no, what's honestly going to make me feel good every single day? I want to jump out of bed. I want to feel excited. I want to have the energy. I want to do work that's meaningful. I want to make an impact. I want to live an abundant life. But I also want to have all of these other things. Once you write them down, it's very achievable. And then you stage yourself and step yourself towards it. Like, hey, listen, the first year we may not be able to do 3 European holidays, but what about 1? Right? Let's start there. So we have a starting point, but now both of us agree to the life we get to create. And it also changes the setting of how you work as a person, because now you're chasing a lifestyle. You're not chasing this arbitrary number that means nothing really, even if that hits your bank account. I want to make $1 million. Really? What are you going to do with it? Like, what are you going to do with it? Oh, but that person has it. No, it doesn't matter. That person has it. That person may have it for a very different reason, may have a very different chase. Why do you need the money? I'm not saying money is bad. You should have as much as you want. But the question is, do you know why you want it? Or you're just chasing it to, flaunt it on social media? Because you can flaunt it on social media at 100,000 and live a lifestyle that looks like a millionaire's lifestyle. It's actually really easy to present it on some social media channel.
Yeah. It's something that we have discovered in our lives, in our marriage, quite well, and having to have those discussions, especially when you have transformative moments. I mean, I've listened a little bit to your story, and I know that you went through a moment where your CEO and your life and your career aren't as correlated as you want them to be. And I feel like sometimes it's very easy for us to fall into those spaces where we have to reassess and rediscover what's most important to us, because life changes. So I'll give you a great example. We're going through, and I talk about this on the podcast a lot. We're becoming empty nesters essentially, where my oldest son is going to college in 3 weeks, and my youngest son lives 3.5 hours away at a academy for soccer. We talked about soccer pre-show, and so we're having to reestablish everything in our lives to how often we're going to be in one place versus another. What is the expectation that we each have? Because we have different expectations of what's needed. Where we are going to travel. We've never been able to travel together. She's retired now, which allows us to do things together, which we've never been able to do. It's been me doing these things. And then what do you feel like when you're away from your family? You're like, oh, I can't wait to go to this place for the first time. You get there, and as soon as you get there, you do 1 or 2 things. You're like, oh, I just want to get home. I want to be home with my kids. I'm missing a big soccer game. It's like this. I don't want to live the life where I constantly am missing something that's there. Instead, we want to be solely focused on the present state, because that's where that peace, that's where that success, that's where that comfort really does lie. And so we're working to establish that as we speak, and we have to do it in two different ways. I'm the conversationalist. I will talk about anything and everything. I will lay it all out there. I'm not afraid, and I will get bullets from her. I will get moments of like, well, I think we could do this, or I don't want to do that, or let's try this. And so, it's finding how not only to have those conversations, but how to implement and execute those conversations that can be even more valuable. Where are you having them? Is it on your date night with your wife? Is it when you get the hotel? How and when are as important as what you're saying.
I think there are many ways to do it, but here's how I like to do it. So not just a money conversation, but we now do an annual meeting where me and my wife would just sit down just by ourselves. We'll have the kids being watched by somebody or whatever the case might be. But every year we'll sit down for about 3 days, and in 3 days we'll just evaluate everything. It includes our relationships. It includes our money stories. It includes our sex life. It includes anything that really is important to us at that time, our businesses, our career, our opportunities, what's important to us right now personally, ourselves, us together, like, well, how are we doing as a relationship? And that would be the big conversation. That would be the big conversation that sets us on the path of kind of reviewing the past year and setting up the next year, right? That's the big one, right? But on a week-to-week basis, date nights are a great spot to be able to rediscover and reevaluate certain things that are important to you as they come up. So, for example, I merged my company with a larger company, Mind Valley. So I built a company called EverCoach, which is a coach training institute. And then we were we merged into another organization called Mind Valley, which is arguably world's largest and highest rated personal training platform. And now it's called Mind Valley Coach. Now, as that merger happened, of course, there was a good amount of transaction that also happened for it. And that happened 3 months ago. So it was middle of the year. We didn't know that transaction will happen 6 months ago when we had our big meeting. So we sat down and we said, okay, well, how do we want to look at this money that we're going to get? Right? How do we really evaluate the different nuances that are involved in this? Taxes, place we want to live. What's our next season of life looking like? But we didn't wait for an annual meeting for that. I just didn't say, hey, you know what? I owned EverCoach because I started EverCoach before I met my wife. I just get to decide money. That's not how you do money well. That's how, if you're doing money that way, where it's your approach, is because there's either ego involved or you don't trust your partner. I trust my partner. So I would go in and I would go, hey, listen, this is what we're going to get. These are some of the options that I can think of. What do you think we should do? And then we would collaboratively go, well, this feels right. This doesn't feel so right. This feels aligned. We want to also make sure we are living and enjoying this money. We're not just thinking about the future and so on and so forth. And we find that. And we decide that on not every week basis, because I think money conversations, once you get the big one out, you're good. You need to talk about maybe once every 3 months, 6 months, maybe. It's not something that you need to have a daily conversation with. You might need that when you just start the new behavior, right? So let's say somebody who's never talked about money to their partner, right? Here's how I would approach it. I would first find if you can take a 2-day holiday. Go to a place that is calm and relaxing, not something that is exciting. So don't go to Vegas to have a money conversation. Go to, Zion, the mountain, to have the money conversation. You still want it to feel expansive. You still want to feel and come from abundance, but you don't want to feel like you need to spend money, right? So it needs to be not chaotic, right? So Vegas is very expansive, yes, but it's also very chaotic. Or New York is really chaotic. If you can go a little outdoors, is better. Mountains are great. Beaches are great. Anything that's calming. That's the setting that you start with. Then take a piece of paper. Do it not on computers and devices, because usually they're distracting and there's something else that's happening always there. And write yourself the questions that are important. You can start with the questions that we talked about already. These questions are great starting points. And what you will find is the values that both of you have around money is probably so different, is what's causing the challenge between how you are doing money right. It's not that you're trying to do bad, it's just your programming, your avoidance, your history, your parenting, or the people that parent you, or father figures or mother figures have influenced the way you look at money. It's not the truth about money, it's the influence you have about money, right? Now you get to choose. You get to choose, do I want to continue to stay influenced by this story, or I want to create a new story, right? If you want to create a new story, again, you collaboratively get to create it. Or for now, you just find a common story, right? The common vision of life, common lifestyle that we want, things that we're comfortable with, things that we're not comfortable with. What you don't want to do in these conversations come from the challenges of the present, because everybody has challenges in life. Because life is not created by living in the state of challenge. You create a life by living in a state of possibility, of trusting that it'll all work out. And because you trust that it works out, you live in a place of possibility. The curiosity is different versus, oh, but we can't afford this, or we can't have this, or we cannot do this, right? Instead of that, you think about, what can we do to do this, right? What are the possibilities, right? Great questions to ask yourself is, what is it that I can do with what I have? Because that keeps you in that rhythm of, there are certain things I have, certain things I don't have, but I can do what I can. Another great question to ask yourself is, what is it that I can do something about, or what I can't do anything about? Right? There are things that you can't influence, right? So there's no reason for you. It's a stoic question, to really great question to ask yourself, is to go, if I can't control it, there's no point crying about it, right? Because I can't control it, right? But what is it that I can control? Right? Because it helps you really stay in the presence of, what is it that I can do? So these are some great questions to ask yourself, ask your partner, and the collaborative answers is what you're really looking for. And the big reminder for anybody who is having this conversation is to suspend your ego. Which is hard. It's not something that I just say it and now you don't have ego, right? It takes work, it takes effort, it takes time. But if you can suspend your ego, and you can come from a place of a common understanding that you both love each other in relationship, and if you're just doing this for yourself, then that you love yourself, and that even in moments where you don't honor yourself, or you're not in alignment with yourself, it doesn't mean you don't love yourself, or you don't love the person that is with you. It simply means you're having a moment, that you're human, and there's no reason to feel shameful or guilty about it. It just is part of being a human being and part of the human experience. So if you can reflect on that and operate from that place, I would think money conversation will become significantly easier for anybody that is trying this right now.
Well, it's great advice for all major conversations in a relationship or in a business. I find that when you focus solely on the challenge, to your point, what we're doing is we're boxing ourselves in to only focus on the things we can't control. It's not the things that we can. When we were talking about whether or not our youngest son was going to move away, our conversations oftentimes would go into a place where it was all the things that we didn't know the answers of. And, I had to center us above that. I had to say, hey, we're going to solve all those questions. But for right now, what are the most important big picture items? And this is, from being a CEO, this is CEO, COO space. And sometimes you have to alter the role. Sometimes you're going into the ground up planning. Sometimes you're starting from the vision. And if you have a great working relationship, I have a great COO who I work extremely well with. And every time we disagree about something, the only thing we disagree on is how we're visualizing the success of what we're working towards. We're not working towards different things. One is working from the ground up. COO, they see it like you're building a Lego house. These basic things go on the bottom, and then we build it up from there, and then we build it up from there. I see everything at the finished Lego box. I look at the end. I look at exactly what it's supposed to look like. We build towards that, and then we go back to the beginning to start building the steps. Yeah. So to your point, it's so good to focus on the things that we can control, to not box ourselves in around the challenges, and it allows those things to kind of fall into place through your teamwork. And it's so successful. These are things that we a lot of times have no problem doing in teams and at work and in other settings, and then we come home and it's way more challenging. And maybe some of that is the ego. Maybe it's the role that you're in. so many people have designed and designated roles within the family, and a decision forces you to step outside of that role or have an opinion of something you don't normally control. And that can be very challenging for the person that's been in the lead in that space for a long time. So really, really good rules of the road for money and just about any conversation we're having in a marriage or relationship.
True, absolutely true. And Scott, you're so on point. These are important conversations to have. And in relationships, we tend to not have it because money, like you shared previously, has so much shame associated with it. It has so much I don't know how the other person will feel about it. So we try to put it under the rug. And then we wonder why we have money fights all the time, because we never really sat down and said, what does it even do for it? What is the role of money? How much do I really want to make? And why is this important to me? And once you get clarity on that, you start to find, and at least in my experience, what I found working with people from across the globe at this point, and I'm going to give a American number, but it is applicable if you translate it to different countries, but about $100,000. Most people would be very happy if they were making just about $150,000, and per person, so about 300,000 as a family. And usually they would be able to live the life they want to live, but they seem to get so obsessed with these devices that we have because people throw so much, firstly, a lot of lies, but sometimes truth about their money, but they throw it on as if it's a thing to shame somebody else for not having it. And so we feel shameful when we watch it and we go, well, they get to have this best life. But we don't know the cost of that life. We don't know if we actually want what this person has in the life. And it tends to be a lot of times single men and single women. Very few relationship people who have at least matured in their relationship would say, look at my car. It's not because flaunting your car is bad. If you love your car, you love your car. That's okay. But as you become a mature individual, you realize what's really important is family. What's really important is how you feel, not how you make others feel. Right? Because if you flaunt your car, yeah, you will make somebody feel jealous, but that doesn't make you feel good. That makes you feel like shit. If not that day, a few days later, right? Because that's not what a human thing to do is. And that's my, I might be a little, I think it's called noise. No, like a little childlike in that. Like my belief is very much that we are functions of love. We are bodies of love, and there is at all times, all human beings, even the ones that we hate, even if we think they are the enemy, are actually operating from love. Their understanding of love may be different than ours. Their understanding of how love is expressed may be different than ours. How they do things in the world may be different, maybe unethical, maybe wrong from our point of view, but the person who's doing it is always doing from a place of love. There might be 1% of the people that are not, but 99% of us operate from a place of love. We just don't agree with their version of love. We don't agree with how they present it and so forth. But if we could lean into that belief and understanding, I feel everything gets easier. Like our relationships gets easier, our partnerships get easier, our work gets easier, our everything gets easier.
There's a lot of men out there who don't know how to authentically connect with other human beings. They're not even trying to wheel and deal. They're not manipulative. They're not unethical. They're
Right.
not hurting anybody. They're actually very sensitive to other people. They're very sensitive to the idea of hurting anybody. They are very careful to be nurturing toward other people in that regard, at least safe. They are very risk assessment focused. They're always tracking risks, and that actually makes them pretty tired. So they tend to stay out of deeper relationships because there's so many variables there. It's not a smart move. That'd be a lot of drama. So maintaining low risk in every area of their personal life allows them to take great risks in their professional life and chase dreams. They'll do things anybody else would be too afraid to do. So the idea of I'm afraid of relationships doesn't even track for them. But it's massive risk assessment that when you go up, you don't take the risks personally, relationally, to share with somebody. There's those meetings and people are talking about their goals and their thoughts, and they're sitting there going, why the hell are people sharing these things? I don't understand.
Yeah,
And
they're
then,
getting
or there'll be the
uncomfortable.
leader who has read a book to say, you ask your people about their personal life, and you're like, oh, how you doing? I'm doing on this trip. Oh, great, tell me about it. And they can at least kind of like play the game, but then they don't reciprocate. They don't share anything about themselves. So they're entirely unrelatable. And their team goes, this guy never shares anything about himself. He never has anything going on. He doesn't really follow up as in the way that I would expect. And I don't feel a connection with him. He's not mean and he pays me well, but I don't have a connection with him. Well, this other company's offering me a little bit more money. Why not? Why not jump ship? The loyalty isn't there. They don't hate you. You just didn't build the relationships. A lot of these guys are bewildered at the end of the day and say, why does nobody be my friend? What is working for other people that isn't working for me? Why am I alone in my penthouse apartment with making, $50 million a year? Why am I doing this? But I'm drinking myself to sleep at night because I'm so lonely. I've never hurt anybody, but why am I so alone when everybody else seems so happy? That's the guys that we're aiming at right now, right? And unfortunately sometimes they get married and their wives, right? They're crying they're crying themselves to sleep in the bed. High performers are some of the loneliest people on earth until they learn that skill set to actually bond with other people.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and I think we're seeing a lot more of this nowadays, and we're seeing more and more single parent houses, which which is very challenging. I would imagine for confidence, especially for men. So trusting people in relationships without that partner, especially a dad around, is a challenge. I've seen that a lot, um, and I also think that the depth of relationships is a fear of failure. So they're scared, and they're scared of failing at something. And the reality is, I say stuff all the time that occasionally I'm like, did I share too much? Maybe I did. And the older I get, the less and less I care about that, because it's the closer and closer to who I am. And the more I put that out there, the deeper the relationships become. The more people listening to us know that this is a real show, not some full of bullshit show where we're trying to act like something that we're not. This is about us learning about each other, sharing good ideas, and trying to help people find a better version of themselves, just like we are in the process of doing.
Right. Absolutely. Most high performers don't even have a functioning framework for who to trust and why. And they don't understand how to let people into those degrees, right? If there's levels of trust that you have to understand and you have to bring people in. Then there's phrases that if you grow up in what we call a securely attached family, where your family practices good social skills, you care for each other's needs, you trust each other, you are consistent and reliable with each other, you show up honestly in the relationship, and you build that depth. If your parents train you in that, you talked about how the silent generation really didn't train people in that. Neither did the boomers, unfortunately. That's why we're in the mix that we're in. But when you have a family, like I'm raising my kids, right? Um, to build that intimacy, to build that and just talk and trust. When my son says, Dad, I want this toy, I don't say, I'm not going to buy you that toy, or go away from me, or just like, oh, right, here, take a toy, right? No, I say, talk to me about why that toy means something to you. What are you thinking there? Well, this and this and this. Okay. You know what? Why don't we find a pathway for you to be able to earn that toy? You don't have to earn my love, but if you want that, let's find a way for you to earn it. You're going to have to learn how to earn your way in the world growing up, and that's cool. So let's talk about that. What are some things that you can do that would reach the value of that? And then I will purchase that for you. Well, Dad, I can do this and this and this. I'll do the dishes, every day for a week or something. Cool, buddy. That sounds like an awesome deal. I shake his hand. That sounds great. By all means, if you do that, I will buy you that toy. And then he reaches that marker and he does it. And I say, you know what? I'm going to buy you that toy and I'm going to do this extra thing for you. And I give a little bonus to him, right? And it's an actual care. But then I give him a hug and I say, buddy, I'm so proud of you for following through on this. That was incredible. You did great. You saw this through. Look at how you're growing. This is fantastic, right? And I'm training him that way. That's called secure attachment, by the way, when you're authentic like that. And I'm actually building that moment with him and that connection. I don't get everything right, and I don't have to, because when I get it wrong, I can go to him and say, buddy, hey, I got to be square with you. I was wrong with you the other day. I said something wrong. I'm sorry that I was grumpy in this regard. I'm sorry. Did that hurt your feelings? Okay, here's what was happening. It's not an excuse. Here's why I did it, so you understand. And then here's what I'm going to do to make it right. Right? Going forward, we're going to take care of each other this way. Secure attachment. When you have that, You have a framework for how to open up with other people. You could do like we did earlier, like I shared with you, like securely attached guys out there. They don't need me to train them and say, hey, go to your wife, share a problem, and then share how the problem feels, and then share a solution and ask for her feedback. He's going to go. He's going to tell his wife, hey, babe, can I run something by you? It's kind of bothering me. Yeah, sure. And he'll share and he'll say this, and then she'll say, oh, have you thought about this? He'll go, that's great. Thank you. And then they just roll forward. It's like that because he's been doing that with his dad. He's been doing that with his mom. He's been doing that with his sister his whole life. So he gets there and he just shares it with her. This is secure attachment. And there's about 50% of adults with not that here in America. So about half of the people listening to the show don't have that, to be honest with you. It's pretty sad.
We were, I was at a conference probably a year ago, and I'm riding in a car on the way to the airport. Excuse me. On the way to the airport, and I'm with an older guy who's potentially going to sell his business, and he's asking me a ton of questions because we buy businesses, and that's something that we've done. And so he's asking me a ton of questions, and I turned to him and I asked him, I said, have you ever asked your family what they want to do? Like, you're saying you don't want to retire. You're saying that you don't see yourself stepping away. What does your wife want to do? And he goes, I've never asked her that question. And I said, that would be a really good start to identify what it is that she wants to do. Well, she's got her own thing and she's doing, and I said, all that's good. What about your kids? Are there things that your kids would like to do with you in the next, and money's not an issue. You guys have made a lot of money. You have more than you need. Like, what are some of I just asked like this. I mean, if I could tell you, these were the 2 or 3 simplest questions one could ask. And the level of perplexity and then awareness to go, I've never asked those questions. And that was about a year ago. I heard that individual is now shopping the business and thinking about something different. And it's interesting. I wonder if they had that level of depth in the conversation with their family. I doubt it, but it's definitely a challenge. And I love what you talked about with the kids. I think I have 2 sons, and I think one of the challenges with boys are how old is your oldest?
7.
So with 14 and 17, they'll be 15 and 18 in a month. I'm at the point where they're separating to create that transition to the next chapter. There has to be this, I'm going to be a guy. And so therefore I can come to dad when I really need him, which I'm seeing, but I'm also getting the shutdown on dad's opinions are funny, or you always go too deep, dad, or we don't need to do everything you do, or whatever it is. Like, it's the teenager thing. Right. And, but I think understanding, just like you talked about with our wives, understanding how they feel loved, what they need in the relationship, it always starts with giving. And so one of the things I've tried to do in my life is focus heavily on what that individual child needs, because they're completely different from each other. And one will ask me for something every day. One will never ask me for anything. But if the one that never asks for anything, if I don't challenge him, even when he does, he doesn't feel like he earned it. Like, I have to actually have a little banter. He's a results-oriented individual. We have a little thing that we do. And I'm like, and I end up folding, but I let him feel like we had a little tussle. And whereas the other child is more of, hey, can I do this? Can I have that? Would you do that? Would you do this? And then he gets several things more than the oldest. And the oldest is always looking at me going, how come it's so easy for him? And I'm like, dude, he asks. He just asks. Like, you don't ask. And so understanding them is part of that relationship building. And I hope that that's something like you're doing with your children, that they take into their relationships and gather that depth and gather that trust, because it's so imperative to build the strength and depth versus the width of just knowing a lot of people.
And all of that is what high performers usually have never experienced. It's one thing that drives them onto the dopamine and cortisol pathways. I will be stressed out and my cortisol will drive me. There's no one coming to help me. I will do everything myself. I will be a one-man business and it will be fantastic. And I will work 18 hours a day for 15 years and I will build a $1 trillion business, and I will have no friends, and I will be miserable and drink a lot of alcohol. and I'll have a wife who doesn't speak to me, and that'll be my life. That's just what it is. And until they learn that this is even possible, like you open that person's eyes. You said, "Well, what does your wife want?" He went, his brain clicked, the grinding of like a car that's not shifting into gear, and he was like, his brain probably said, "People don't ask each other that question." That's probably what his brain said, like, does not compute. Why would I ask my wife what she wants? And not in a bad way, just legitimately, why would I ask her what she wants? Well, because she's your wife, and because she has a huge say in this, and because it impacts her life deeply. And I can just ask her? Is she gonna like be mean to me for asking her? No, she's probably going to be happy that you asked her. And then you're going to have a conversation about what you can both build together. Well, what if she's unreasonable? Well, then you would tell her, "Hey, I don't feel that this is reasonable. Can we find something that's a little more reasonable?" People will do that. Well, people that love you will do that. Yes. That is exactly the process. It's like mind-blowing because they've never experienced it. You take them all the way back to that childhood moment of people saying, "No, get out of here. You don't get a toy. I'm not buying you that crap. You don't deserve that." Or, "No, get out of my face. You don't need that anymore. No, come on, leave me alone." They go back to that and they say, "Well, that's what my wife's going to say. Hey, babe, what do you think about me retiring?" "No, get out of here. I don't want to listen to that." "Yes, you should retire. You should sit at home and you should be my husband and you should just pay attention to me and watch movies with me." Right? "You know what? I don't even think this is a good, you're going to retire. Well, why don't we just get a divorce? Because I don't want to spend more time around you." Right? They run through all the risks in their head of what she could say, and it paralyzes them to even think about asking her. So then here comes Scott. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy, your wife loves you. Why don't you ask her what she thinks about running a business? Why don't you ask her what she thinks about the money? It sounds like the most dangerous thing in the world. I would rather close a bear trap on my own head than do that. But then you know what? You know what's magical? And you've seen this, Scott. When they actually go and ask, people respond so well. People love to be treated like a human being. People love to be treated with respect. They love to be asked questions. They love to be invited in. They love to know what you're thinking. They love to talk with you. They love to be involved in a decision. They don't want to take over the decision usually. Maybe your parents did, but not this person who cares about you. They just want to work with you and have a decision that feels okay to them too. And then you work together to build it. And the high performing guys I work with, man, the execs, they're like, "I had no idea I could just talk to my kids." Right? "I haven't spoken to my son in 2 years. Does he hate you?" "No, we just don't speak." "Well, okay. Could you call him and say, 'Hey, son, this will sound a little weird, but I have found that I really would like to have a relationship with you, and I haven't had much of one with you. I don't know how to build this yet, but I'm here to ask two questions. Number one, are you open to a deeper relationship, whatever that may look like? And number two, what would that look like? What does that even look like to you? Tell me what an ideal relationship for us might look like. Do you have any ideas on that? If so, we can figure out how to get there." Right? And usually kids are like, "Dad, are you drunk?" But then like they open up a little bit and they're like, "You know what? This could be cool." Like daughters, especially, they're like, "Yes." And they unroll their list of things that they want in the relationship with you. And dads are blown away by by the guidance that these kids will start issuing them into taking charge in that relationship. So it's amazing when you invite the right people in, how your life just gets so much better. So much better.
Yeah, I think a lot of providers, what we would call good dads of the past, people that just put their head down, worked for their family, did whatever they needed, never let their family down, paid the bills, helped them go to college, do whatever. They're the workhorse climbing the mountain with all the packs. They're the dads now that let their kids bring all the stuff down to the beach and then they carry it all back, which I'm not a fan of. I made my boys carry everything they brought to the beach because I will not be their camel, but I will do it when they need me, but I'm not doing it at the beach. But I think what happens a lot of times is you play a role in a relationship, and sometimes you play that role so well that you have to realize that it's like an actor who has to come out of that role. Like you cannot be that character throughout your entire life or you will be empty and deserted. And what happens is they only see you as that, and you've only shown them that. And it might have been the most important thing for them I had a conversation. It was a great conversation. We do a Valentine's Day event for our practice, and 150, 200 women all come out on Valentine's Day, have a beautiful lunch. Excuse me. We have it's a super fun day. We do it all over in different markets and different offices. But I was at the one locally here in Chesapeake, Virginia, and I got into two conversations back to back where the wives were like, you know, all my husband wants to do is talk about the cost of, he wants to buy a new car, but he can't just buy a new car. We have $2 million in an account with your company, and this guy will not buy the car that he wants. And all I said was, you know, I understand, and it's painful. They're so analytical that they're hand wringing, and it just makes her so frustrated, right? And I said, that probably makes you very frustrated. She goes, yeah, it does. And I said, he's been the provider for the family, and he's had to go to war in his brain to make sure everything worked his entire life. And now you want him to come off $60,000 like it's nothing. He still sees $60,000 like it was 30 years ago. And in your brain, he sees that as showing, just so you know, he sees that as showing you love. He's not doing a good job of it. You see it as the opposite. And she was like, oh my gosh. Both of the ladies were like just simply mind blown. Again, you probably see this every day in your practice. And then 10 minutes later, I'm having a conversation with another one. She's like, we're picking out all the things in the new house. We're downsizing. And we got in an argument about the furnishings, like the granite countertop or this. And it was like $10,000, Scott. And I said the exact same thing I just said. I was like, well, it worked before. Let's try it again. And I said it again. And she said, you know, he came to me the next morning and he apologized. And he said, whatever I want, I can have. That it's just really hard for him to come off of this. And that's the difference. So the difference between the two men are, one allowed that vulnerability. He wasn't weak. He wasn't soft. He was just honest. And that authenticity allows them to understand each other and to move forward. And it's such a powerful thing.
This is the key piece right here. Men are meant to go to war, and we're meant to put on our armor, and we're meant to go to war. And some men never, ever, ever learn to take their armor off. That's what we would call that avoidant attachment style, where you've attached, you only know how to relate to other people with your armor on. So you imagine a guy going out fighting his wars, then he comes home, he trumps in the house with his muddy boots, and then he wears his armor at the dinner table, and then he lays down in his bed at night, he wears his armor, he's trying to make love to his wife while wearing his armor, he's bathing and showering in his armor still, and then he gets up and he goes to work the next day in his armor. And that's why nobody can relate to him, because he looks like a crazy person. And no one can snuggle him, and he looks very uncomfortable because he is very uncomfortable. But he's waiting for the enemy to kick in his door and stab him with a spear while he's sleeping. So he's just in his armor. He doesn't trust anybody, but that's how he takes care of his family. That's how he cares for everybody around him, is to never, ever, ever take his armor off. What I teach men is, when you are ready to take your armor off, you understand that the door is locked. You understand the people in the room with you are safe and do not have a knife. They're not going to stab you. And you can take your armor off selectively with your family and with your friends. And then when it's time to put the armor back on, you put it back on, you go back out, you do your war. But you learn to take the armor off. That's the work. That's the attachment work here that we've got to do to train these men to be able to take their armor back off, and the women as well.
Attachment theory was originally developed by John Bowlby out of Cambridge University, and later Mary Ainsworth. And then, I actually learned about it in first year university back, however many years ago that was, 16 years ago or so. And it was really high level, where it talked about how, our adult relationships have a big influence on how we learn to attach to others. But there was really not much discussion in terms of how we can change our attachment style, and not enough discussion, in my opinion, around how this actually affects our adult romantic relationships and even friendships, co-working relationships, family interactions as adults. And so this is where a lot of my research began, was diving into this a lot more deeply. And so there are 4 major attachment styles. I really like to think of our attachment style as this subconscious set of rules we have about how to give and receive love and how to connect with other people. And every single person has an attachment style. So this affects everybody on the planet. And the 4 attachment styles are: number 1, the anxious attachment style; number 2, the fearful avoidant; number 3, the dismissive avoidant; and number 4, the securely attached style. So if you'd like, I can kind of break down a little bit about each
Please.
style and how they're really formed.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
awesome. So the secure style is basically the style that we want everybody to become, if they're not already. And for myself, I was definitely not a secure attachment style. It's quite rare nowadays for somebody to be securely attached through their upbringing. Research a few decades ago showed it was about 50% of the population, but now current research is showing that quite dramatically trending downwards. So we have the securely attached style. They develop because in childhood, they have what we call approach-oriented behaviors from their parents. So what this means is that if the child cries or it fusses or is upset, the caregiver or parent will go towards them and will try to soothe them and figure out what's going on. So there's this baseline in the background of what is known as attunement or presence from the caregiver. They're tapped into what the child is feeling and experiencing. Now, this may seem like a small thing, but it has a really huge impact, because when a child can't speak the language yet, can't understand that a caregiver is not going to just abandon them out of the blue, and knows they're completely dependent on their caregiver for survival, then having that caregiver be attentive, be there, be present, try to soothe you when you're crying, it actually gives a child in their upbringing all of this messaging or conditioning that says, I can trust other people. It's safe to rely on other people. It's safe to give and receive love. I am confident in who I am. I'm worthy of having my emotions expressed and seen and heard, and I can communicate, and that's safe. So statistically, we have securely attached children turn into securely attached adults, and they tend to do the best in relationships. They thrive the most in relationships, and they report not only the most long-lasting relationships, but also they report feeling happy and satisfied the most in their relationships. Most people nowadays are not securely attached. So this is where we have the 3 insecure attachment styles. At one end of the continuum, if you will, there is an anxious attachment style. This individual usually has very loving parents, but they experience either real or perceived abandonment in their upbringing. And this looks like they could have a parent who, leaves or passes away at some young age. Or it could be that there are 2 very loving parents, but they work a lot. So they're constantly traveling for work. So this child grows up to really have positive conditioning about love and really want that love and connection, because when it's there, it's really nice. But there's this background conditioning of feeling like love is always taken away. Love is there, love is taken away. Parents are there, they're traveling a lot. Parents are there, they're traveling a lot. Repetition and emotion is what conditions our subconscious mind. And literally, these are our subconscious set of rules about love. We're not consciously deriving these things and thinking them through as adults. They're these natural programs that we've acquired. And so what ends up happening is somebody from an anxious attachment household grows up to be quite afraid of abandonment. And they often have these big wounds around feeling afraid of being abandoned, disliked, rejected, excluded, and they really cope with these things by trying to maintain proximity. So as adults, these are the individuals who sometimes can be needy or clingy in relationships and call a lot or text a lot and really derive a lot of their sense of self-worth from closeness to other people, rather than having this more deep intrinsic sense of self, which can make them very sensitive to rejection and very afraid of people leaving them. On the other end of the continuum is our dismissive avoidant, basically the opposite of the anxious attachment style. They grow up with this overarching theme of childhood emotional neglect. And so what happens is a child, when they need that attunement, biologically we're wired for attunement and attentiveness from our caregivers. When that's not there because parents are emotionally unavailable, this child grows up to go, there must be something wrong with me that I can't get this need met. And so they actually internalize a lot of shame. And sometimes emotional neglect isn't like very overt. Sometimes it's not like, oh, the parents are never there. The vast majority of the time it's very covert. It's like, at school on time, food is on the table, everything's good. But if you cry, Go in the other room and come back when you're ready to stop crying. Or children should be seen and not heard. Or don't be a crybaby, toughen up, stiff upper lip. Like these types of messaging cause a child to be like, okay, this emotional part of myself is wrong and I need to divorce myself from it. And so this child grows up to basically try to stay as far away as they can from their own emotions, because this is their adaptation to cope with that kind of childhood. So they get afraid of too much attachment and too much closeness because it makes them feel vulnerable and emotional, and they associate that with being weak and shameful. So this adult becomes somebody who's constantly keeping people at arm's length. And if people get too close, they like really push them away. And of course, it's often that anxious and dismissive avoidance end up in relationships together and get into this push-pull cycle of like, come close, and the other person's like, get back. And then last but not least, we have the fearful avoidance, sometimes referred to as the disorganized attachment style. This is what I was growing up. And this attachment style is characterized by having a lot of chaos in childhood. So it could be like a bad divorce, an addict parent, an alcoholic parent. The overarching theme is like you never really know what you're going to get in your household. Sometimes there can be really loving and nice experiences, and other times there's like chaotic and confusing experiences. And so this child grows up to like want love and closeness and yearn for it, and they share in that anxious side. Like they want that closeness, they're afraid of people pulling away, but they also, just like the dismissive avoidant, fear closeness. So it's this funny dichotomy of like, I want closeness, and then somebody gets close and you're like, wait, get back. And you can't really tell which side of the fence you're on. So fearful avoidance tend to be very hot and cold in relationships, tend to be very push-pull. They can be very present and giving, but they can really withdraw and retreat a lot in relationships. And they tend to feel very confused. Like, do I want closeness or do I not want closeness? And they flip-flop a lot as adults, which obviously makes them quite confusing partners to be with. But the best news of all of this is that no matter what your attachment style is, you can heal to become securely attached. And it not only heals the relationship to yourself, but actually will transform completely your relationships to others too.
Yeah, it's a great, great definition and breakdown, and highly recommend to gather more information on this. Go to the YouTube channel, just go down the rabbit hole, because you break down intimacy, you break down like how they see themselves, how they receive love, like all these types of things. And I found myself thinking about the earliest version of me in relationships and the chaos that I created because I was so confused. And I think I was exactly what you described, which is the chaotic, yeah, 100%. And it's that need for the attention, but then being afraid that it's going to go away, or there's no real safety, and you're constantly seeking safety.
Yes.
And yet you don't find it in someone else. You have to find it internally first. Like you have to create that internal version. And so I think we heal ourselves as we get older, as the more we learn about ourselves. I always say I'm very grateful that I met my wife after I had, screwed up a couple of relationships, because it allowed me to learn what was acceptable, what was unacceptable, what I needed to feel. And I've said this on the show before, but it's listening to the styles also is really interesting, because if you are the partner that gets into a disagreement, I'm the one that wants to talk it all out. Like I want to go right now, right? I go as deep as we can go. Like I'm breaking down your parents in 5 seconds of your relationship. I'm like, tell me about your mother. What was she like? Do you feel loved by your mom? Do you, and people open up to you. Like part of being a podcaster, like it's awesome. We get some of the greatest conversations because people feel safe, because I will talk about things other people won't talk about, and there's a safety to it. But in listening to that, I will not go into the way what I think my wife might be, or what, I actually sent her 2 videos. I said, pick me and pick you, and of your YouTube channel. So I'll have fun with that later after the interview. But
Wait, what do you think she was? What do you think she is?
I think she's dismissive.
Yeah.
But I would let her define that. Like I think that, but at the end of the day, we were married 21 years, and honestly, we're really a great match, and we've grown together. I could tell you right now, I probably broke up with her in a long distance relationship every weekend every weekend. And
This
every
was
single,
me before my
I,
husband. This was me in every past relationship before him.
yeah,
I did the work
yeah,
before my husband now, but I totally relate to you.
yeah. So I would break up with her and then she would call me. She stopped taking my calls. Like this was pre-texting, thank God, by the way, because I can't imagine what I could have written. But I would get a call from her the next morning and she'd say, "Are you over yourself?" And I would say, "Yeah, I'm sorry." And we would move on.
Good for her.
And I would not be married. We would not have the family we have. We would not be great parents together. We learned each other's strengths and our blind spots, and we grew together. And there's still remnants of those things as we get older. There are times where you hit really, really challenging moments and you might fall back on some of them. But I found it so interesting to listen to this, and I've read about attachment theory back again in the early days of college, and I remembered some of the things, but not to this level. And the way you described it to relationships was so powerful to me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so powerful to understand this because I think the first part that happens is that we start realizing our own patterns and we start realizing, oh, my partner doesn't love the way that I love necessarily. And I think that's its own breakthrough. My husband, when we first met too, we had both done a lot of work prior to our relationship. So we definitely had like some secure attachment in there, both of us. And I'm sure that's the case for you and your wife now after 21 years.
I don't know that we had it early. I think just to interrupt for 1 second, I would imagine that we built it together.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful because we got married in our early 20s. So we were still figuring it out, but we figured it out together.
Yeah.
And we had
so
commitment,
cool.
which is crucial.
Yes. And with commitment and the willingness to learn and do the work, we can adapt. And so like there's the hard way of doing things, which is probably the way that you end up doing it, which is committing but never giving up and learning things through like the hard way and tough discussions. And then there's like a much hopefully easier way for anybody listening, which is like you don't have to feel around in the dark. You can just recognize, oh, this is my attachment style. These are my fears. These are my needs. These are my emotional patterns. These are what I need to do with my boundaries and communication. And this is my partner and this is their rules for love. And not only can we change the fears and concerns that are not serving us, but we can also make sure that we're learning each other's fears and concerns and have healthy strategies to work through them. And that's really the system that we built, is to help people shortcut that what can be a very difficult and long process. The process that I went through took me about 3-4 years to figure it out because I didn't have a sort of framework and shortcut. And it's funny because my husband, by the way, is when we met, he was dismissive avoidant. So we share the same pairing, the fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, and they make for good matches together. Absolutely. But it also, you have to do that work. Otherwise it's going to be really tricky because you can also have like, you can really hit each other's pain points in the relationship if you're not aware of it too. So the system we built was really, how can we shortcut this process? So once we learn our attachment style and the way that we love, we realize not everybody loves the way that we love. Fearful avoidants love through depth, right? They love through like, let's get down to the root cause. They're really good at making people feel seen and they're drawing information out of people and having that transparency and deep connection. But dismissive avoidants love through often acts of service and more indirect, less vulnerable things. And they're very grounding and they'll tell it how it is for you. And that's their way of loving a lot of the time. And you know, anxious attachment styles love through like being so thoughtful and you know, they tend to love through like being very, very giving and sometimes a little too people pleasing for their own good. But once we realize, oh, people love differently than we do if we have a different attachment style, we can learn their rules for love, our rules for love, and how to work those out, but also how to change the rules that are no longer working for us. So things that would have probably caused you, for example, or myself in past relationships to break up with somebody all the time, like these ideas that, well, I'm always going to be abandoned or betrayed anyways eventually. So the more I get close to somebody, the more, as a fearful avoidant, I would be terrified. It was scary. It was like, oh my gosh, I know the more I love, the more I'm just going to be hurt. So this you know, you have this like bittersweet experience of being in love or falling in love, where it's nice, but it's terrifying and overwhelming. And it causes you to need to push people away out of self-protection. And so when we realize like, oh, those rules are dysfunctional rules, let's reprogram them and change them, it really opens up this capacity for us to heal and thrive in relationships in a much easier way.
Yeah, you know, it's so important to have the awareness And I think in when you grow up the way that I did, I tend to I'm diagnosing things like 10 minutes ahead or sometimes 5 years ahead. And so the challenge is it's great when you're a CEO and you're building a company. It's great when you're looking so far and you're watching trends. But when you see them in a relationship, you're definitely intense, and that intensity can be a lot. And it's funny, we have some friends that occasionally, that very close friends, and they would say things like, the wife will sometimes say, why aren't you more like Scott? And I'll look at her and I'll be like, if he was more like Scott, you would have been divorced in like 30 seconds. Like the two of us together would have completely broken the world. And you have to have that balance. So the benefit is having someone like my wife who balances me, who will say, hey, let's not tell everyone we're going to do something over the next 3 days. Let's have a night where we go to bed early, we eat a quiet dinner at home, we like that. And I wake up and you feel so much better the next day. But I almost needed that equilibrium, that balancing, and it allows you to start to see things about yourself through the other person. And I think that's what you're describing. And I did not do any work ahead of time, but we definitely worked it out together, which I think is fun. But as I listen to your breakdowns, even the stuff that goes into the strengths, like some of these things are really great strengths. It's not always that it's blind spots, right? These are things that people can leverage and utilize in their careers with their families, as mothers, as fathers. And as long as it doesn't go into the crazy part where it gets really challenging.